Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Youth and Women Platform. And this is your host, Sister Zeenat. The purpose of the program is we talk about the problems and the solution of the youth as well as women. Every time we have a different topic. So today in the studio we have an expert. She's a scholar. She did her master's, she did a bachelor's from California in accounting, and she had the passion to come to Iran to study Islamic science and philosophy. She's doing her master's in philosophy and Islamic science, and here she is with us in the studio. Sister Maryam Muaddal. Assalamu alaikum, sister. How are you?
Walaikum assalam. Alhamdulillah, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And thank you so much for being part of the studio and program.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, sister, we are going to have a very interesting topic today
inshallah.
about influencers.
Yeah, inshallah. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alayki ya Fatimata az-Zahra wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So today's topic that I thought would be an interesting topic to discuss is influencers. So in today's pop culture, this new phenomenon has been created where there are people called influencers. They exist on social media. So usually Facebook or Instagram, YouTube.
Twitter,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about Twitter, but usually from what I've seen, it's usually Instagram and Facebook that they're usually, and YouTube. Those three, it's very common for them to have. So I was looking up the definition on Google, and Google tells us that a person with the ability to influence potential buyers of a product or service by promoting or recommending the items on social media. Now, I think it's important to kind of decipher between there's like two types of influencers. We can, let's say there are influencers of the dunya and the influencers of the akhirah.
And the hereafter.
The hereafter, exactly. And so it's kind of important to distinguish these two. And I first want to start with talking about those influencers that affect our worldly life, that influence within the choices that we make within the world. And it varies from cooking, cleaning, nutrition, makeup, fashion, all of those things. And so I think it's really important to recognize that some of these influencers are making money out of what they do.
Yes, yeah.
So they do market and they are trying to sell a product, even though that's not what it seems like. And they have this facial they kind of express this thing where they're saying, oh, like, I'm your friend kind of thing. It's not like an ad. It's more of like, hey, I'm your friend, listen to me. That type of.
Go on, don't forget to click on subscribe button.
Yeah, that, and then also be like, don't forget to order your so-and-so thing, right? Or your, I don't know, like it's kitchen tools, or it could be clothes, or it could be makeup or whatever. So that's what they're doing, and some of it, now according to Google's definition, it's usually they're influencing you to buy a certain product, but not everyone is like that. Sometimes I've seen influencers out there, for example, doctors who they don't actually make any income from it. They just want to promote, let's say, good health, right?
Yes.
Or they want to promote like nutrition if they're a nutritionist. So there's also like, you have to recognize the different types of influencers out there. And some of them have different goals, and some of them are actually want to make money, and they also have another goal in mind as well when they're doing it. So it's really important when we're looking at this phenomenon to recognize that certain people have scholarship, like they've actually studied in a specific area. Let's say you're talking about nutrition. Like there are nutritionists out there who are influencers at this moment who they've studied years to be able to help other people, and their degree is in that area, so they are more qualified to talk about it.
It's
right?
the expertise.
They have their expertise. But there's also influencers out there that they don't necessarily have an expertise. They've just, through trial and error, learned like what works, what it doesn't work. For example, I've seen with like makeup products, like there are just people who've like worked a lot with makeup products and skincare products, and they're like, okay, this works well, this doesn't work well. Like they just, through trial and error, they'll tell you what works well. Now it's important to decipher these two types of people, these two types of influencers, because what I've noticed is that if you have two types of influencers and they're both trying to influence you on buying, let's say, skincare products. And one is just someone who's just experienced different skincare products, and another one who's actually a skincare doctor. Which one's more smarter to listen to?
Yeah, skincare doctor.
Skincare
yeah.
doctor, the skin doctor, because they actually know what's good and what's bad in the products. And I've seen like makeup influencers be like, oh, this product is good, works well for your skin. But then you listen to the doctor influencer and they're like, don't use that because it has this ingredient, and that's not good for your skin in the long run. So they actually can tell you like, oh, this is really not good for you, even though you might have a good experience with it. In the long run, it will hurt you. So I think that's really important to look at their expertise when you're trying to navigate the influencers. I know I've seen that with my personal experiences, that it's really important to look at that, what is actually their knowledge behind it, and if they actually have a doctor or some type of degree in it. Now, no, it's important to understand that like when we're in this world of influencers, that we don't flood ourselves with it. And sometimes that can happen because we're constantly being bombarded by, oh, buy this works better, do this, do that. And it's especially if they're influencers that are making money on specific like brands or specific products, that they might try to sell us products that we might not need.
Yeah.
And that brings out consumerism. That might bring out aspects in ourselves that we might have to buy things that we don't really need. So it's important to understand that like one of their goals is to sell you something.
Yes, this is about the business. Usually
Yeah.
the youth get attracted, and when they see, they want everything, the makeup products, the clothes and everything. So they are just making business out of this, and we are just getting influenced by them.
Yeah, and so it's really important to recognize that. So if you're constantly looking on Instagram and you're just looking on these
Yeah.
pages, you might find yourself constantly buying these things,
Yes,
and you might
you
not
do.
even need it, right?
Yeah.
So it's important that when you're looking at it, when you're looking at this stuff, it's like, well, first of all, what's your goal? Like, why are you listening to this person? Let's say you need more information about nutrition, right? You need more information about what skincare products to buy. Let's say you have dry skin, right? And you're looking for a product to help you with that. So first you know that, okay, I have this problem, I need something. Or it could be cream, it could be, I don't know, lotion, whatever.
Go for herbal products.
For herbal products. So you need some type of product that will
Yeah.
help you, but you also don't want it to do more damage
Yeah.
than good. And so you figure out what you need, what is your goal, what is your need based on that, and then find someone who can actually address that, and hopefully more of a professional, someone who actually wants to help you and not just sell a product that won't work or that will give you like your skin more damage.
Everything
in
is
the long term.
online, because online buying and online selling, yeah.
Especially with
understandable.
COVID-19 right now, everything.
Yeah, it has become so virtual, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, influencers goes on YouTube by making the way they make the videos, it's more entertaining. Sometimes you start following them.
Yeah.
You really want to, like, you subscribe to them,
Yeah.
and you want to be like them.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have to really be careful because they can, and sometimes what happens with influencers, they start out with one thing.
Yeah.
Let's say they start out with food, or they start out with nutrition or whatever, and they start influencing you in other ways as well, in their lifestyle choices. And so for us as Muslims, we have to be careful, like, okay, what lifestyles are they selling us, or what lifestyles are they asking us to do? And usually it's not like, oh, do this. They're just doing something and they show it to you,
Yeah.
and then you like it.
I've even seen on YouTube that they are like young 20 years old boys. They started with comedy series, like 10 minutes or 3 minutes, some comedy they started doing, and they started getting a lot of subscribers.
They made comedy series?
Yeah, they make like short films, short
Oh, okay.
comedy,
Okay.
scenes of 3 minutes or 10 minutes. And once they got like hit by too many subscribers, they started talking about many views. And when people started asking, where do you get these political views from? They say, we just Google it, we just go and read some books. And sometimes they were talking about Islam, sometimes they were talking about politics, sometimes they were talking about miscellaneous topics.
Yeah.
And there were many things they were speaking was like full of errors. They were wrong.
Yeah.
Because there are people who started following them, they just think they are right.
Yeah.
And just without any proof, they end up believing in them because they are making money. And they even said, we are retired. At the age of 25, 26, 28, they are saying,
Because they're
they have
making that much money.
a lot of money.
Wow.
They say, we are retired. And I have been listening to them, the explanation that they were giving. Many times they were wrong. But there are people who listen to them who believe in them because they have been following them since day one.
It could be interesting. That's unfortunate. So we said that there's two types of influencers that at least we're categorizing. One that they talk about like something specific, usually about the dunya, the world, and then sometimes we have influencers that are more their focus is more the akhirah, or like for example hijabis. There are hijabis out there who they started a blog or they started an Instagram account or YouTube account, and they shared their experiences as someone who wears hijab. And we see this in today's culture. And sometimes they'll do good things and we are inspired by them. If they wear hijab, we're like, oh, okay, that's great. Like they're wearing hijab, right? And, but then at the same time, we have to be careful. Like sometimes these influencers might do bad things as well, right?
Yeah.
And so we can also be affected
Yeah.
by their choices as well and
Yeah.
what they do. And it's an important thing is that when we're living in this world, when we're living in this dunya, we all have room to make error because we're all on the path toward akhirah, toward the next world. And so what ends up happening is that each and every one of us has the choice to do good or bad. And sometimes we will choose the bad. Sometimes people make mistakes. Sometimes it's on purpose and sometimes it's not. And so it's really important that when we're following someone on Instagram or Twitter or whatever social media account that we do have, is that we recognize that they're not infallible, that they make mistakes. And so that like we can't expect them to be perfect.
Yeah.
That's definitely, we can't have that. But at the same time, it's important that if we're going to follow someone, especially when they're affecting us in terms of our religion, that they don't push us further away from Allah.
Exactly. I do understand that, what you're saying. Because on YouTube, if you go, there are like ladies out there, men out there who start talking about true story about their life, their lifestyle. And it is very interesting, you know,
Yeah.
the way the journey changed from this life to that life and how they came to hijab, how they came to faith, and everything goes well. Because they are not masoom, they are not perfect, you know, they start making errors the way they are. You know, it can be a big influence for many youth who's watching them.
Yeah.
You know, the youth should understand your ideal role model is not them because they are still on their own faith process. You know, you have your own way to go. So don't take them as an influencer. Don't start following them. This is like following an actor. When you say, oh my God, I love this actor, I love this lady, you know, you have to be very careful of who you're following.
So that's the thing. When you're seeing these influencers, like they're also human beings, and they're either moving closer to Allah or moving away from Allah. And each act that we do, each choice we do, we're either moving closer or away, or we're getting closer to Jahannam, or hell, or we're moving away, or we're getting closer to paradise, or we're moving away. And so, who I am today, if I'm a good Muslim, I'm a good mu'min, if I'm a good believer, I might not be that tomorrow. And it's the same thing with Shaitan, right? Shaitan, Iblis at the time, he was amongst the angels. He was worshipping Allah for thousands of years. It's said in the hadith that one of his prayers lasted 1,400 years.
Wow.
Okay, so, and none of us can pray to Allah
Yeah,
that
for such a long time, the way he did it, yeah.
So he was really worshiping Allah. He
Yeah.
knew and he understood who Allah was. He was in complete servitude to Allah.
Yeah.
Yet because he had this hidden arrogance in
that
himself,
I am better.
that I'm better.
Yeah.
And it showed. Eventually it showed. And
yeah.
when Allah tells him, bow down to Adam, he doesn't. He
Yeah.
walks away. He says, no, I won't. I'm better than
I
you.
am better.
خَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِن طِينٍ. That I am created from fire and he is created from clay. And therefore I am better than him.
Yeah.
And so he had this arrogance. And so
Yeah.
that arrogance showed itself when Allah told him to bow. And he ended up in the hellfire.
Devil.
And so he ended up being cursed by Allah and he was sent away. And so if Shaitan had such a journey, it means that all of us might also end up in the same plot. We might end up, God forbid, in hell. So we have to also always consider that tomorrow, there's no proof or guarantee for tomorrow that the way we're going to be acting. Even if you go to the Hawza, even if you are doing Salatul Layl and
If you're
all
going to
these prayer-
seminary.
The seminary, yeah, there's just there's no way, there's no proof to that.
Yeah.
And so that's really important to consider this when we're discussing this whole thing. Now, it's really important that when we're picking friends, when you're picking people that are going to be our influencers, that they help us get closer to Allah and not away from Allah.
Yes.
If we're not careful of that, then they can divert us away from this.
Listen to the story. I would just say don't take them as an influence. Don't make them as your role model. Don't follow them. So thank you so much for listening to us. We will be right back after a short break. Thank you so much for being with us. So, we were talking about the influences through the YouTube or Facebook. So, sister, we have been talking about a very interesting discussion about these influences. Do not take them as a role model, I would just say.
It depends, honestly. You can't really say that don't, because at today's age, like, everyone is into this
Yes.
type of culture. And at the end of the day, our friends or people around us do influence us.
Yes.
We can't
Yeah.
deny that. So there are people who influences our in life. Maybe, we're not now discussing specifically social media, but the reality is people will influence us. Regardless of being on social media or in life, people will affect us, and we need to be in contact with people. So we can't just say, oh, just ignore them completely, right?
Yeah.
So that's not really, it really won't work. But it's important that we have choices, right? We have a choice to be influenced by X or Y or Z, like
Yeah.
Sarah or Mariam or Hala or whoever.
School or college or movies or media, someone is going to influence you.
So you're going to be impacted
Yes.
by other people. That's just the way it is. But we have a choice. We can pick better people. We can pick people who will bring us closer to Allah. Who push us to do the right thing. We can choose that, right? And our friends, we can choose also influencers who also affect us and push us to do the better and pick the better choices. So there is a verse in the Quran that says, Ya waylati, ya waylata, laytani lam attakhidh fulana khalila. It says, woe to me, I wish I had not taken so and so as a friend. And this is a verse of the Quran that Allah is talking about, where on the day of judgment, people will be saying that, oh, woe to me, I wish I had not taken this person as a friend.
As a friend.
Now this can also apply to an influencer. It doesn't necessarily mean that the person has to
Yes.
be physically there, right?
Yes.
So it applies to anything that's influencing us. We have to be careful with that. That Allah is telling us that on the day of judgment, we're going to regret that we allowed certain people or things to influence us. And so we have
Yes.
to be aware of that. Like, if we're going to choose a friend, is that friend going to help me in the dunya and the akhirah and this world and the hereafter? So we have to be careful of that.
Every single moment that we are watching YouTube or Facebook, we are on Facebook, everything that we watch on TV or whatever, that influences a mind,
Definitely.
a brain, and that can become a part of our actions and a tongue, so we have to be very careful of what we are watching, especially the youth,
Yeah.
because they are very young, they are still children,
I mean, children within Islam, once a person is like 14, 15, they're practically an adult now.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important they need to be taught who to pick as friends and
Yes.
who to allow to influence and not. And it's really important that we shouldn't fool ourselves. Just because someone's committing a sin and they don't push us to do it, it doesn't mean that's okay. Like, in the sense that when your friend does a sin, even though if they're not telling you, or you know that they're doing it, but then they don't tell you to do it, that doesn't mean that that's okay that they're doing that sin. That still will influence you. That will have an impact, because we become like our friends. That's the nature of human beings. We become like the people around us. And that's why it's really important that, as the verse is mentioning, like, we pick good influencers, people who are around us that will help us get closer to Allah, because it's a difficult journey. It's not an easy journey, our journey toward the akhirah, the next world. Now, what's important is that within today's world, we have Muslims who are influencers, and they affect the way we act and the way we are doing things. Now, I don't know how many, but there's some Muslims out there that there's a recent trend with Muslims who are hijabis, and they've taken off their hijabs.
On you, where like
Well, they're on like on YouTube, Instagram, and
they are
Facebook.
YouTubers and they are
They're
inspirations.
YouTubers,
Yeah.
so they're influencers,
yes.
and they're Muslims, and they've wore the hijab for a while. And what happened, I mean, each one of them has a different story depending on who you're talking about. And I'm not going to bring any names, I don't want to do
Yeah.
that. But so some of them, like, for example, they've been wearing hijab for a while or maybe for years. And they inspired other people to wear it maybe by doing tutorials of how to wear hijab. And they've even made hijabs for other hijabis to wear, and they've sold them. So they made a business out of them. So this is becoming quite a trend. And I think there was one, I was talking to my friend about this one influencer, and she was hijabi, she made hijab, she made a business out of it. She became, she gained popularity. And what happened was with her, interesting, you kind of see that. And then after a while, she was doing makeup tutorials, and she was doing hijab tutorials. And then she did like plastic surgery. And then it was interesting, and then and you see like, okay, the way of the hijab is changing, the hair is coming on forward, the way she's addressing people is different. And then at one point, she takes off her hijab. And also like she's wearing like very expensive clothing. You can see there's a trend here happening, that it seems like she's...
This is because of lack of knowledge.
I mean, it
very
depends.
clearly,
There's no, like, this is the thing, where you can't judge every single person. Every person's story is different. So I don't want to judge that person or all these people and any of these girls.
But that person is an influencer. There are people who have been following her, and all of a sudden when she takes off hijab, then the youth start thinking, oh, it's so cool to take off hijab. And then, yeah.
Well,
so,
we'll get into
yeah,
it. Hold on.
yeah.
And so what happened, and so it's interesting, because like when you look down in the Instagram page or their Facebook page, you actually find comments on there where the youth, some of them are disappointed and they're upset about it, and they're like, how could you do this? Or different things like that. So you see that. And it's sad, and it just about this specific phenomenon. And I think one of the things that I see with this is that when you become an influencer, and you're trying to sell a product, specifically you're an influencer to sell a product, and maybe you might not say that that's what your goal is, but some of these influencers, that's what their goal is, to advertise, essentially.
Yeah.
Even though they might not say it to your face, but that's what it is, right? And you're constantly worried about, okay, how can I increase my followers? How can I sell this product more? How can I make better business? You're constantly thinking about, okay, how can I look better on camera? How can I, even with the hijab, and even with all of this, right? Even though that you're Muslim and you're constantly just thinking about the material aspect, you're strengthening the material aspect, and you're kind of neglected the internal aspect, the ruh. So remember, we said that we have two aspects. One is the material aspect, and the other is the immaterial aspect, which is the soul, the ruh. And so if you're constantly just thinking about the material aspect, and you're forgetting that this ruh exists.
This spirit exists.
This spirit exists, that the ruh exists, and you're neglecting it, you're going to eventually divert. You're going to get further away from Allah, because you didn't strengthen the immaterial aspect. You forgot about it, right? And Allah says in the Quran, if you forget me, or you'll forget, you'll forget yourself. And that's what happens.
Wow.
So this is like, that's what I'm saying. It's maybe they might have knowledge, they might know what's right, but this is what they decide. And so it's not just overnight you see that they take off their hijab. It's step by step. And eventually you'll see that, okay, they've taken off their hijab. Now, and sometimes they'll say, oh, I'm still the same person, I'm still rich. But internally there was a change. We didn't see that change. There is a transition. And this is the thing, it's not with them. Each and every one of us are going through a certain transition. Whereas, for example, during the month of Ramadan, the beginning of the month of Ramadan, you might not feel too spiritual. But by the end of it, how do you feel?
Yeah, you totally
You feel closer to Allah. Typically,
Yeah.
if you're fasting and you're doing the ibadat and all of that, you're doing the worships, and you feel there's a difference internally. You see that, you feel it. You feel closer to Allah. You want to worship Allah. By the end, you don't want the holy month to finish. And you see, so all of us are either moving closer to Allah or moving away from Allah. And depending on the choices we make, we're getting closer or away. And that's why you'll see this phenomena of people taking off their hijab. And it depends on other things. Like the hijab in itself, it's one of the side things within our religion. It's not one of the main things. If you think about it, like prayer is more important than hijab. And I'm not saying hijab isn't important, but I'm saying if you want to actually categorize it, prayer comes like first before hijab. And then later on you have the hijab. But it just, when someone takes it off, it just shows that, okay, internally there's something going on.
Yes.
And they're diverting.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing, obviously. And it's a sad phenomenon. Now, for those sisters, or people who are following these type of people and they're heartbroken, I understand why they could be upset, because they looked up to this person at one point and they were inspired to wear hijab for them.
Yes.
But at one point they diverted and they're like, what happened, right? And so they might be heartbroken, and
Yes.
this can happen. So what my suggestion is, first of all, recognize that, okay, what they did is something that they shouldn't have done. Like, that is a sin. Not obeying Allah's orders is a sin.
Yeah, first
That's not foolish. One of the first step when we want to talk about Amr bil Ma'ruf and joining the good, forbidding the evil, is to recognize, okay, if someone's is doing a sin or not doing a wajib, we have to recognize that, right? And so first step is, okay, let's recognize that. Let's be frank, right? Now, then the next step is that we want to help guide that person. And I think it's important that when we see people do this, that we try to tell them, hey, this is not okay, you're hurting yourself. And the way we need to do it isn't from a standpoint of the ego. And this is something really important that usually in our communities we neglect. That when we want to do Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar, we're like, sister, why don't you have a job? Like, we do it in such a harsh
aggressive way.
Very aggressive.
It hurts people.
It hurts people, and it's not helpful. If anything, it usually sounds, and people have a sense. Everyone can sense each other.
Yeah.
And when you say it like that, it sounds like you're saying it from your ego. It doesn't sound like you actually mean that you care about the person.
Yeah, you don't think.
You're not coming from a place of trying to help the person. You're coming from a place where, like, you just want to make, it's kind of just seems like something evil. It's not coming from the right place. And so your intention of when you do Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar, that you're enjoining the good, forbidding the evil, really is important, that you do it from the right point, the right intention, right way. Your intention is pure, and you want to actually help the person. Now, if I come to you and I say, hey, assalamu alaikum, how are you? How's it going? I haven't seen you for a long time. And then after a while you conversate, and then you little by little, you're like, okay, like, you know, I noticed you're not wearing your hijab. Is everything okay? What happened? Tell me. Like, it could be something. And sometimes I see when people go through a very difficult time in their life, it could be like a divorce, it could be something with their
health
issues. That sometimes that difficulty can lead them to get further away from Allah.
I have seen those examples.
Yeah, unfortunately that happens sometimes, especially with divorces. And it leads them away, or issues within the family with their parents. I've seen that a lot as well. And unfortunately that issue causes them to move away toward Allah.
Yeah.
And they end up taking off the hijab.
Yeah, because they keep thinking because it's financial difficulty, right?
I mean, it could be different reasons. I mean, everyone's story is different, so it's hard to like generalize. But then they move away from Allah, and then they take off their hijab. And so if someone addressed that issue, the underlying issue of what the problem is, they might move back toward Allah. They might move back toward getting closer to Allah. And so even with the influencers, like, I would suggest, like, private message them, tell them, hey, like, we're worried about you. Now, if one person does it, it might not be effective. But if 100 people do it, 200 people do it, 300 people, 100, and everyone's saying, like, put on back your hijab, like, just message them and just be like, we care about you, put on back your hijab, don't do this. You're distancing yourself from Allah.
There will be an effect.
There will be an effect.
Yes.
If you have a lot of people telling them, it eventually will be effective.
Because she may be going through something in her life that we cannot be judgmental about.
It could be anything. You don't know. And with this specific influencers, that the trend I saw, that specifically with that trend, we've seen that, okay, this is what it was. So it's important to understand that, and it's important to take a stance. Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar is wajib.
Yeah, it's mandatory for us.
It's mandatory.
Yeah.
We need to do this, and so we need to practice this. So even with someone who is an influencer, we can influence them.
Yes, we can. Why not? Because they are going through some kind of a situation that we can help them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Very well. We have been talking about influence, how the YouTube can influence us, how Facebook can influence us, because this is social media platform time where people sit on YouTube the whole time and keep watching small clips. Have you been kind of a person who keeps subscribing in various kind of YouTube channels? Are you that kind of a person, sister?
Some of them I do, but then sometimes I unsubscribe after a while. I see like there's not a
And then you
button.
unsubscribe, maybe.
Yeah, and for me, it's a little different because sometimes I just want to keep tabs and know exactly what's happening in the community.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to know what the trends are and be a little bit aware of that, just because of my responsibility to the
Yes.
community. So
It's the news you're talking about, the news.
more of
yeah.
not just the news, it's just even what's the trend, the pop culture, what's going on with the
Yeah.
youth. I think that's really important for me
Yes,
to know.
you have to know what's going on. with
But I've
you.
also, like, sometimes with some influencers, with, for example, nutritionists, things like that, I do actually look into what they're saying, because, like, if it's a doctor and they're saying, like, eat
Yeah.
this or that.
Something knowledgeable. Who's
Knowledgeable.
expert in their field.
Expert in their field, like, then that's something worth listening to.
This makes sense because when you're talking about consult a professional who's an expert, don't just make anyone a role model. Like we will talk about the role model in the next episode because we are running out of time and we have to end this one. So thank you so much, sister, for being part of this show.
Well, thank you for having me.
So thank you so much, everyone, for viewing us and listening to the topic of influences, how YouTube and Facebook, we all know how Insta influence us and how we go about it. So stay tuned for another exciting topic. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.